Was the cramps in human fly and onto another human fly. Aftermath. 13 takeaways from the election of Donald Trump, which has seen me avoid all media for a week now. Now, I've got an 8-year track record of getting elections right. The irony of the last time I got one wrong, being Donald Trump in 2016, is not lost on me, and I got everything wrong here, apart from one thing. I said all the way through that the deciding factor on this election would be Democratic voter apathy, and posted just before Biden quit that he had to step down due to Democratic voter apathy, causing them to be on course to lose the election. In the end, there is only one statistic that you need to know what happened in this election. In 2020, Donald Trump got 74.2 million votes and Biden got 81.2 million votes, one of the biggest margins in modern history. In 2024, Trump got 74.5 million votes and Kamala Harris got 70.7 million votes. Trump did not get any more votes this time. He got the same amount of votes with an extra 200,000 or 300,000 people, which wouldn't even be accounted for by population growth, than he got in 2020 when he lost by miles. And this time he won by miles. Because over 10 million voters sat this one out. 155 million voted in 2020. 145 million voted this time. Democratic voter apathy was the deciding factor. That is it. Every other thing is fractional. The fact is 10 million people that voted for Biden sat this one out, if you can believe that. The stats are amazing. There's a lot of talk about men and women and so on. I mean, the proportion of the female vote, 54% of women voted for Biden. And for that, they got over 300 seats and won an election. This time around, the same figure, 54% of women voted for Kamala Harris, and they lost a jaw-dropping 80 seats and are consigned to the dustbin of history, despite the same proportion voting for the Democrats. The representation system in America is just absolutely shocking. 65 million voted for Obama. He gets 332 seats and wins by a landslide. 65 million voted for Hillary and they lost more than 100 seats and lost by a landslide. It is incredible the way their system works. It's very much geared towards an unfair representation on what goes on here. A lot of men that voted for Biden sat this one out, true, but so did a lot of women. Probably 6 million men and 4 million women. The proportion of men that voted for Trump out of that has gone up from 50% who voted for Trump and 48% of men who voted for Biden. It changed to 54% of men voting for Trump and 44% of men voting for Kamala Harris, which is that 4% shift. But that's not really 4% of voters necessarily switching allegiances. I think that's being overplayed. And this is point one. My takeaway point one is apathy. Because Trump's proportion of men going up is really more reflective of the fact that his vote didn't change. He only changed his vote by 300,000 people. It's much truer to say that 10 million people that voted Democrat the last time around sat it out. The Electoral College is a painful thing which often returns for multiple elections the person that lost the popular vote. And it did that in 2016 where Hillary won the popular vote and Trump lost and still won the election handily. So the Electoral College is not a great thing, I don't think. But this time Trump has handily won the vote by quite a long way, by probably 4 million this time around, after losing by over 7 million last time, which is incredible. And you can argue that, my point number. So when people like Trump thrive when the electorate has a hopelessness about them. His own support base is rusted on. People vote for fascists. And there's no doubt that Trump is a fascist. But they will always vote the same way. They don't care what you do. They don't care what he's done. They want their man. But the other voters don't. The other voters needed to be buoyed massively to overcome. And I've always said, you can't reason with people on climate change or with Trump. You've got to outnumber them. And they didn't. And it's the Democrats' fault. And I'm going to do a piece on why the Democrats are so to blame for what's happened. Things like race and women played a role, but not anywhere near as much as people just not voting. There is a hopelessness when you've got someone like Trump who has committed so many illegal wrongdoings and just gets away with it. The court cases go on for so long and nothing ever happens to him. So people become disenfranchised with the whole system. And a lot of the interference from places like Russia are designed to sow seeds of doubt, to make people disenfranchised and not want to participate because they just think that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what crime Trump commits. Now he's going to absolve himself of all of them. But they just see that nothing ever happens to these people. My point too is men. A lot has been made about the fact that men decided this election and how women would feel knowing that so many men walking down the street regard them as so low. That what is relevant to women is completely irrelevant to these men when it comes to voting for Trump. But that's not really true. Yes, some men that voted for Biden now voted for Trump, but a fractional percentage. I would say it's much truer to say that probably 6 million men and 4 million women sat this election out. Trump's vote stayed the same. The Democrat vote went down 11 million. You don't lose 11 million voters and win an election. And that's not down to... I think a more pertinent question around men is why so many men can listen to everything that Trump has been accused of, which is being a genuine lifelong misogynist and representing a party of Republicans who seem to think that The Handmaid's Tale is the Bible, and who have successfully repealed Roe versus Wade and are coming after virtually anything that is pro-women, who are naturally very, very sexist men. But they were already voting for Trump. But I think it's important to note why, these aren't good people. These are people that have listened to allegation after allegation of misogyny from the Republican side, even in Australia with its massive problem with women. Scott Morrison's rampant misogynistic regime was turfed out, and misogyny was a huge part of that. We actually did care about how they treated and viewed women. It seems like in America you're more likely to elect a gay black man than you would be a woman. But ultimately, I don't see that it is actually one of the defining characteristics anywhere near like apathy is, because Trump's vote didn't change. You've got to ask why those people are voting for him in the first place. Because they're not good people. That's it. They can listen to even if Trump had just arrived on the scene, you can tell what a lying, narcissistic sociopath, incompetent buffoon he is. And they're like, yep, that's our man. But there's also this notion that the Democrats sold themselves completely on this ticket of representing women and not representing men at all. And there is a big, usually people in the younger brackets will never vote right wing. But there's a lot of men now that are young that are voting right wing. I've said for years that, the right are an aging population being replaced by more progressive younger people. Well, the progressive parties are letting those people down by being as much right-wing as they can be. And with the Democrats, with the caveat of completely ignoring male issues like suicide and the lost way of men that no longer can count on, a kind of life that they were brought up to believe define them as men. And that is a big issue. Again, it's not the defining issue of the election. It just shows that there's a lot of young men that will now vote right wing because they don't feel like they're being heard or represented by the Democrats, who aren't left wing at all. They just feel like that they're just ignored. Women, point 3 of my takeaways on Trump's election win, which I will split off shortly and do the rest after. Women have been enjoying a Handmaid's Tale nightmare in America in recent years. The Republicans have become much more staunchly anti-women over time. They were, at one point, even evangelical Christians were relatively pro-choice in the start of the 1970s. And you would not recognize the Reagan era in their attitudes to women compared to the modern Republican Party. Women have really got it rough now. The likelihood of Roe versus Wade going federal is enormous. But Trump gained like 70 seats, and he only needed 300,000 more votes to win. An awful lot of the people that sat this one out, which I'll get to in a bit, were women. So to say that it's solely disenfranchised men that caused this big election loss isn't true. It is mainly people sitting it out. They didn't go to Trump. Some did, but probably a few 100,000, maybe 1 million or so. But the vast majority of the disparity between 2020 and today is people sitting it out. Last one for now, the Dems. Well, the Dems can never be forgiven for what they've done. Both the Republicans and the Democrats had revolutions around 2016. The Republicans went down this incredibly populist right-wing totalitarian vibe, signified by Donald Trump, but they were already going down that road. We saw something astonishing on the Democrat side, which was the emergence of Bernie Sanders screaming socialism and being welcomed by the public of America. And ever since then, the Democrats have been far more concerned with shoving that progressive voice in the Democratic Party, which represents a lot of their younger base, to the sidelines and continuing with business as usual. With Hillary Clinton, with Joe Biden, with Joe Biden's pick, they have shut out the progressive voices and they're paying for it. They never put up any newcomers. They had so much time to try and foster and encourage these progressive voices in the party and develop new leaders, and they had nothing. Up until 3 months ago, when we got Joe Biden's vice president, was the best they could do. Continuing with Aftermath, 13 takeaways from the win by Donald Trump, my first failure in 8 years, preceded by the previous Donald Trump victory. So number 5, Harris and Biden. Biden is emerging as a front runner in the villain of the piece. The current thinking is that whether it was his fault or not to continue on and try and fight this election, it was a disastrous one. But the fact that he didn't quit earlier is likely to have been the most fatal blow of all. So by quitting when he did, he immediately chose Kamala Harris, and the Dems were left with no choice but to anoint her 100 days out from the election. If he'd have said that he wasn't contesting the election a year or so ago, they could have held primaries. And to not do so and to give someone 100 days to win an election was a disaster, as it's been proven to have panned out. So he could have stepped down earlier or chose to not contest the next election, and he should have. And he should not have anointed Kamala Harris in the way that he did, taking away the right for all the party and their voter base to choose who they wanted to represent them. And maybe I've said before in this piece that I don't agree that the sole deciding factor here was a woman or a black woman running at all. I think that it is shameful that America has still not got a female leader. They've certainly got a problem with women, but I don't think that it's in any way a deciding factor here. I think the fact that he left it until 100 days out and then anointed his own successor was a disaster. As far as Kamala Harris, she did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. She campaigned better than Trump. She was given an impossible task and it didn't work. And it's a crying shame because it looks like with Hillary getting 74 million votes, Biden getting 81 million votes, and Kamala getting 71 million votes, that America will never vote for a woman. But I don't believe that that is realistically the case here. I think that they could have put plenty of men up who would have got trounced. I did say at the time that Gavin Newsom would have been a better option than Kamala Harris because she was stuck with being part of the apparatus of the current administration, whereas he was a newbie. And the fact that they didn't cultivate a single person to replace Joe Biden is forever a disgrace on the Democrats. The future I think is going to be worse than the media is making out. Everyone seems to be walking around saying it's business as usual, it's just another new American president. He's already said what he's going to do. We've got on Project 2025 the long-standing, well-developed Republican plan to reshape America in their own model, to impact almost every part of American functional governance, to protect the Republican view of the way of life, which is now just a Donald Trump view of the way of life. The Republicans haven't given us anything other than Donald Trump, which would have meant their party would have splintered into the wilderness had they lost, because there is no one to replace him. But now their cult is in power. They will purge the Republican Party if there are any voices left that stand up to Donald Trump. They will be purged. They will be vindicated by what's happened. Nothing is safe. The media must be terrified now. I said in the last piece I did about America's Hitler moment, which they failed. But the media are going to come under such sustained governmental attack. Journalists in particular, we're hearing, the dangers that journalists now face of having their emails and their phone records subpoenaed and taken away from them. Social media too, we saw Mark Zuckerberg kissing Trump's backside in the most undignified manner in the lead up to the election. The media will come under the most sustained pressure. Even though most media is centre-right wing anyway, they will come under enormous pressure in the same way that the totalitarian regimes pressure the media into slavishly promoting the government. We're going to see now. The judiciary has already been, we've seen this already happening. The judiciary in America is going to come under a sustained assault to let every single Republican offender off and punish every single Democrat supporter they can. We've seen the stacking of the Supreme Court. All of this is, it's already common knowledge. Future elections. What is going to happen now with future elections? They will change every single thing that they can to ensure that they remain in power. And free and fair elections are not part of that. So they're going to certainly come after the way that, votes are counted, who they're counted by, who they're ratified by, in the same way as any totalitarian dictatorship, which they are. America's a totalitarian dictatorship. Trump, the two-term limit is, the only thing saving us from the two-term limit being abolished by Trump is his age. I don't think that would stop him. The punitive comeback, Trump has shown that he, like all narcissistic sociopaths, never forgives a slight. He will be going hell for leather after everyone he can. He himself is up to his neck in multiple trials he'll now absolve himself of, and be coming after anyone that ever went after him. Roe versus Wade. The irony of Roe versus Wade is that the Republicans said we were never coming after women's abortion rights. All we cared about was putting women's abortion rights back in the hands of the state and not a federal concern. Within a few months, they will be coming for abortion to be a federal concern. Without any doubt. Trump doesn't care. I mean, he's a lifelong misogynist. They will be coming after Roe versus Wade and making it a federal issue, and he's got no reason to fight that. Race, again, will become a huge issue. Trump's already been one of the biggest dog whistlers on race throughout his whole life. That is defining Americans as being white Christian Americans is going to be at the forefront of everything they do. Religion as well. The irony of Trump being the first atheist American president is quite mind-blowing, but he will happily let the punitive populist Christian right run rampant over everything. Economics, Trump's ability in the economic realm was massively oversold. The post-COVID economic landscape has been a global one as far as massive cost of interest rate rises, cost of living rises, and so on, has happened in the UK, Australia, all throughout the world. His benefits are zilch. He added an enormous amount to the deficit, which he will continue to do solely as a handout to his billionaire classmates in tax breaks. And the punitive effects of tariffs, which have been proven to only affect the buyers in your own country and not actually hurt the sellers in a foreign country, is going to be an astronomical buyer's remorse thing for Americans if he's allowed to do it. The polarization of America is complete. We now basically have two separate countries living side by side. There'll be New York State and there'll be California, who will be doing their best to treat the rest of America and the southern states and the Republican states as a foreign enemy, and doing their hardest to stop whatever Trump is going to attempt to do. And that is going to be the biggest clash between state and federation for a very long time. There are likely to be enormous protests and possible civil war and outbreaks when that clash between the federal Republican Party and the Democratic states is enacted. It is likely to lead as close to civil war as America has come since Civil War. In fact, it might be the most destructive act America has done to itself since the Civil War. And then you move into the realm of incompetence. Trump is a wildly incompetent man that has overseen multiple business failures. Apparently, he couldn't even speak on The Apprentice without multiple takes and an auto cue. He is not a smart man. He is just very savvy in guessing the popular mood and cutting through the crap. But he is no leader. He also doesn't care about anyone. He doesn't care about the people of America. He cares about himself. And he has shown over and over to be in cognitive decline due to his age. We're now dealing with a senile version of Trump on the attack. We have nepotism. He has shown that he will happily elevate his own idiot siblings into positions of power any chance he gets, and now he's got every chance. He's on trial for so many malfeasance and he will absolve himself. How does that show to the rest of the world that he can commit so many wrongs and just absolve himself? Democracy itself will come under enormous threat because right-wing totalitarians have shown there's one thing they really don't like, and that's the wrong answer from a democratic public. And, we've been waiting for the end of the Western Empire for many years now. And it's likely, with America still firmly at the head of the queue as far as Western nations go, that this will be the declining moment. It's probably been a decline that's been happening for the last 20 years, but realistically, this is probably the end point of the Western Empire with the BRIC nations rising up. One of the biggest tragedies, point 7 of my takeaways about Donald Trump, is Elon Musk, a man I detest, the only man on planet Earth who makes Mark Zuckerberg look cool, and perhaps an even more detestable human excrement than Donald Trump himself. The billionaires of the past, even though they may well have been completely evil, had this altruistic notion of benefacting the nation. The modern billionaire class has none. They are about fame and social media, and that's what we're going to get. A bunch of tech bros and billionaires that want to be in government. We're essentially handing the keys to the billionaire class again, which they already nearly have anyway. Seeing Elon Musk in government, I'm sure that they'll be looking to repeal the notion that you had to be born in America to stand for president soon enough. Who knows what Elon Musk has asked for? At point 8, it's such a bad example for everyone, for children. It just, it shows you can be the worst human being on earth, incompetent, a liar, a racist, a sexist, and be elevated twice to the highest office in the land. Point 9, Ukraine and Russia. That's a very interesting one because Trump's pulled between two posts here. The primary one is that he is absolutely beholden to Vladimir Putin, which we know. Point 2 is that he is completely a representative of the billionaire class. They are making billions of dollars a month out of American taxpayers simply transferring billions in aid for Ukraine to American arms manufacturers. Will he be able to stop that? He's campaigned on being an anti-war person. The last time around, those in the powers that be kept him as far away as possible from foreign policy decisions that would impact the military because they know he's a maniac. But this time around, he's been telling everyone that he's going to be stopping these wars. Well, I think the initial thing was definitely he's beholden to Putin, so he'll be stopping the money going to Ukraine. But the flip side is that money isn't going to Ukraine, it's going to Americans. It's going to American arms manufacturers. So that's the big fight. But I think the current Republican Party are so punitively anti-democratic, or anti the Democratic Party, that they will fight anything that they believe is coming from the Democratic Party, and they regard the war in Ukraine as being a Democratic Party war. So I think that will win out. It's widely unpopular with the Republican Party to support Ukraine, and they love Putin. Even Tucker Carlson kisses Putin's backside. So I can see that being the end of that conflict. Gaza and Israel is a massive deal. I think everyone thought this election would be about abortion. Actually, it's shown that American women aren't a monolith. They aren't a voting bloc that will solely vote on abortion. I guarantee you one of the biggest takeaways that is yet to be made public about this election is the amount of women, progressive women, who sat this election out as punishment to the Democrat Party slavishly allowing Netanyahu to commit genocide in Gaza. We know that in the swing states, there were thousands of voters in small areas that were very heavily supportive of Biden and who didn't turn up to vote for Biden because of the war in Gaza and Biden being seen as an extreme facilitator of Netanyahu's genocide. That's the Arab side of America, but the non-Arab side of America are the progressive voters that didn't turn out for Biden or Harris because they're seen as facilitators of Netanyahu. The parallels between 1968 and the people that were against the war in Vietnam and the fact that Richard Nixon, a right-wing dictator who would have been all over the war if he'd have been given a chance, are very strong today. Trump will be all over Netanyahu. He's not going to want to stop supporting Netanyahu at all. But there's a lot of people that didn't vote for Trump that are very much against the war in Gaza who just didn't turn up to vote Democrat because they're so angry, and it's arguably an even more important aspect of why they vote than abortion is. And we've seen millions and millions of women didn't vote. And there's a lot of young women who are regarded as more progressive that didn't vote. There were reasons, and one of those is Gaza. But now Netanyahu knows with Trump in power, he can do whatever he wants. He survives on there being a war. He's gone as soon as it's over. He has no reason to stop now. Trump has gone out to Muslim Americans saying that he will stop the war in Gaza, but it is so wildly popular with the Republicans that support Trump, that's not going to happen. Point 11, going back to the end of empire, is the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India and China, already arguably the largest economic bloc in the world. A lot of the world particularly if Trump starts involving tariffs, are going to be running to the BRIC nations. And with the war in Ukraine likely to be wound down and Russia re-emerging on the global stage, it will seem like the longest term victory for Vladimir Putin possible, but also for China. The biggest economy in the world or thereabouts, they will be sitting at the very head of the table. They're not encumbered by these wars at all. And America will be seen as a reckless country. And at point 12, part of the influence of places like Russia on American democracy and on democracy in general is to weaken the West's faith in democracy. The faith that the people of China and Russia will have in democracy, in Western-style democracy, heralded as a leader of freedom, is going to be zero. When they see Scott Morrison, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, and they see the chaos befitting the UK and America and Australia, they're not going to be chomping at the bit to have Western-style democracy at all. They will say, look what it got you. And the final point in all of this, Australia. I don't see there being huge impacts on Australia. I think that it actually helps Anthony Albanese get elected next year, and it's far less a positive for Peter Dutton than he currently believes, because he's an absolute idiot. He's got no idea at all what's going on. He thinks because a populist right winger won in America that that's a boon for him. After a year of Trump, that ain't going to be the case. People are not going to be wanting to replicate what America has done for itself a year from now. Economically, you know, Americans and tariffs is going to be the big talking point. I don't see that huge behemoths in the American economy like Walmart will put up with tariffs on Chinese goods when they sell $500 billion worth of goods to America that ends up in chains like Walmart. I can't see that happening particularly, but nothing will have pushed Australia closer to China than the election of Donald Trump. And let's face it, he doesn't have friends in foreign countries pretty much anywhere. Every time a populist right-winger comes into power, they've gone. Like, Boris is gone. The Tories in the UK have gone. Bolsonaro in Brazil is gone. A lot of these right-wing whack jobs have already been dealt a blow. Scott Morrison was the biggest Trump kiss-ass on planet Earth. He's gone. So they're going to be a very isolated nation, and I've talked for long enough on that subject.